What if the key to unlocking a lifetime of secrets was etched onto your very skin? For one overworked waitress, a single glance at a simple tattoo was about to unravel a past she never knew she had, and a future she could never have imagined. This is a story about a hidden birthright, a grandmother's undying love, and a test of character so profound it could either shatter a young woman's spirit or reveal the unbreakable strength within her. Lena traced the rim of a coffee cup with a damp cloth, the motion automatic, her mind 1,000 miles away. It was always 1,000 miles away, tabulating the cost of her mother's medication, the looming rent payment, the car repair she couldn't afford. The late-night shift at the Greasy Spoon Diner was a blur of tired faces and empty plates, each one a tiny, insignificant step towards staying afloat. Her own exhaustion was a heavy cloak she'd worn for so long. She'd forgotten what it felt like to take it off. In the corner booth, an elderly woman sat alone. She was different from their usual clientele. Her coat was simple but made of a material that drank the dim light of the diner and held it in a soft, dark glow. Her posture was ramrod straight. Her hands, adorned with a single elegant ring, were folded atop a leather handbag that was likely worth more than Lena's car. She hadn't ordered much, just a cup of black tea, but her eyes followed Lena with a quiet, unnerving intensity. Lena approached the table, her professional smile plastered on. "Can I get you anything else, ma'am?" The woman's gaze didn't lift to her face. It was fixed on her wrist. As Lena reached for the empty sugar packets, her sleeve slid back, revealing the delicate tattoo that curled around her wrist bone. A fine, black vine wrapping around a small, 5-pointed star. It was a design she'd gotten on her 18th birthday, a way to beautify the faint, star-shaped birthmark she'd had her whole life. The woman's breath hitched, a sound so small, yet in the quiet hum of the diner, it was like a crack of thunder. "Where?" The woman's voice was a hoarse whisper, trembling with an emotion Lena couldn't place. "Where did you get that?" Lena paused, her hand hovering over the table. "Oh, the tattoo? A little shop downtown. I designed it myself, to cover a birthmark." The woman's eyes, a piercing shade of blue, finally met hers. They were swimming with a sudden, shocking storm of tears. She slowly lifted a shaky hand and pointed a trembling finger at Lena's wrist. "My daughter," she choked out, each word a shard of glass. "My Amelia." She had the same one. Not a tattoo. A birthmark. In that exact spot. Before Lena could process the impossible statement, the woman's composure shattered. A sob tore from her chest, a sound of such profound, ancient grief that it silenced the clatter of cutlery across the room. Her shoulders slumped, and she crumpled forward, her head falling into her hands as she wept without restraint. Lena stood frozen, a waitress in a cheap uniform, as a stranger's world, and her own, collapsed in tears. The diner fell into an awkward hush. Lena, heart pounding, instinctively moved around the booth and placed a hesitant hand on the woman's shaking shoulder. "Ma'am, are you all right? Can I get you some water?" The woman, whose name Lena would soon learn was Eleanor Vance, took a few shuddering breaths, trying to compose herself. She looked up, her face etched with a pain that seemed to transcend time. "Please," she whispered, her voice ragged. "My driver is outside. Would you be willing to speak with me for a moment? After your shift. I will compensate you for your time, of course." Lena's manager, a perpetually annoyed man named Stan, was already striding over, his face a mask of irritation. "Is there a problem here?" Eleanor Vance straightened, and in an instant, the fragile, grieving woman was replaced by someone of immense, quiet authority. "No problem at all. This young lady was just being very kind. I was simply feeling unwell." She turned back to Lena, her eyes pleading. "Please." Torn between her boss's glare and the raw desperation in the woman's eyes, Lena made a choice. "My shift ends in 20 minutes. 20 minutes later, Lena found herself sliding into the impossibly soft leather seat of a black town car. The world of the Greasy Spoon, with its smell of stale coffee and fried onions, vanished behind tinted glass. Eleanor sat beside her, silent, clutching her handbag as if it were a lifeline. She directed the driver to a gleaming skyscraper downtown, a building Lena had only ever seen from the outside, a monument to a world of wealth and power she couldn't comprehend. "I know this is highly unusual," Eleanor began, her voice steadier now. "I apologize for my outburst. It has been a very long time since I was taken by surprise." She paused, turning to face Lena fully. "My daughter, Amelia, was my only child. She passed away 25 years ago. She had a birthmark, a perfect little star on her right wrist. It was her unique mark. To see it on you." She trailed off, unable to finish. Lena felt a strange mix of pity and disbelief. "It must be a coincidence, ma'am." "Perhaps," Eleanor conceded, though her tone suggested she didn't believe it for a second. "But I have lived long enough to know that some coincidences are threads of a pattern we cannot yet see." She looked at Lena, her gaze taking in the faint shadows under her eyes, the worn fabric of her uniform. "You work hard. Do you have family?" "My mother," Lena said simply. "She's sick. I take care of her." Eleanor nodded slowly, a flicker of understanding in her eyes. They arrived at the skyscraper. A private elevator whisked them upwards in unnerving silence. The doors opened directly into a penthouse that was less a home and more a museum. White walls, minimalist furniture, and floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a breathtaking panorama of the city lights. It was beautiful, sterile, and profoundly lonely. "I have a proposition for you," Eleanor said, leading Lena to a sitting area. "I want you to quit your job at the diner. I will pay you triple what you make there to work for me. As a personal assistant, a companion, I don't care what we call it. What I want is time. Time to understand this. To talk to you." Lena was speechless. It was an insane, unbelievable offer. A lifeline thrown from a world she didn't belong in. The money alone would change everything for her mother. It would mean better doctors, proper care, an end to the constant, grinding worry. But it felt like a dream, a dangerous one. "Why?" Lena asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Because of a birthmark." "Yes," Eleanor said, without a trace of doubt. "Because for the first time in 25 years, I have felt something other than grief. I have felt hope, and that feeling, to me, is priceless. Please, help me understand why." The desperation in her voice, the plea of a mother who had lost everything, resonated with the part of Lena that fought every day for her own mother. Against her better judgment, against every rational thought in her head, she heard herself say, "Okay." Lena's first day was surreal. She traded her stained apron for a simple, new dress Eleanor had an assistant purchase for her. The cavernous penthouse was her new workplace. Her primary duty, it seemed, was to simply be present. They sat for hours while Eleanor spoke of Amelia. She was a vibrant, rebellious spirit, a painter who loved bright colors and wild music, a stark contrast to the monochrome silence of the apartment she left behind. "She died in a car accident," Eleanor said, her voice flat, as if reciting a line she had memorized for a quarter of a century. "She was driving too fast on a rainy night. That's what the police report said." Eleanor led Lena to a door at the end of a long hallway. This was her room. "I haven't let anyone change a thing." The room was a time capsule. Canvases leaned against the walls, filled with bold, emotional strokes. A record player sat in the corner, a dusty vinyl still on the turntable. And on the dresser was a silver-framed photograph of a smiling young woman with Eleanor's piercing blue eyes. Lena felt an eerie sense of trespass, of walking through a ghost's life. "May I?" Lena gestured to her own wrist. Eleanor nodded. Lena pulled up her sleeve. "You said her birthmark was identical. A perfect 5-pointed star. Just there?" Eleanor confirmed, her gaze locked on the spot. "I was adopted," Lena said softly, the words hanging in the still air. "I never knew my birth parents. My adoptive mother is the only mother I've ever known. She found me through a private agency. The records were sealed." Eleanor's hand flew to her mouth. The air crackled with a sudden, impossible thought. A wild, terrifying, beautiful possibility that neither of them dared to speak aloud. Could it be? Was it even conceivable? The hope that had flickered in Eleanor's eyes now burned with a desperate intensity. She looked from the photograph of her smiling, long-lost daughter to the face of the young woman standing before her, and for the first time, she saw more than just a passing resemblance. She saw the echo of Amelia's jawline, the same curve of her smile. The investigation had begun, not with papers and files, but with a shared, unspoken question that threatened to rewrite history. Their fragile, budding hope was interrupted by the smooth, condescending voice of Marcus Vance. He let himself into the penthouse with his own key, his polished shoes clicking on the marble floor. He was Eleanor's nephew, the son of her late husband's brother, a man who had seamlessly integrated himself into the management of the Vance family fortune. He was handsome, impeccably dressed, and carried an air of effortless entitlement. "Aunt Eleanor," he said, his smile not quite reaching his cold, assessing eyes. He stopped short when he saw Lena standing in the doorway of Amelia's room. "And who is this?" "This is Lena," Eleanor said, her tone suddenly formal. "She will be working with me." Marcus's gaze swept over Lena, a quick, dismissive appraisal that made her feel small and out of place. "Working with you? On what, precisely?" "I handle all your staffing through the family office." "This is a personal arrangement," Eleanor stated firmly, a hint of steel in her voice. "I see." Marcus walked further into the room, his smile tightening. "A personal arrangement that begins in my late cousin's bedroom." How sentimental, he directed his next question to Lena, ignoring Eleanor entirely. "And what are your qualifications?" Lena bristled. "I was a waitress." Marcus let out a short, humorless laugh. "A waitress, of course. Aunt Eleanor, may I have a word?" "In private." Eleanor's jaw tightened, but she nodded. Lena retreated into the living area, her cheeks burning with humiliation. She couldn't hear their words, but the tone of Marcus's voice was clear. A low, insistent murmur of warning and suspicion. When he emerged minutes later, his professional mask was back in place. "A pleasure to meet you, Lena," he said, the words dripping with insincerity. "I trust you'll take good care of my aunt. She can be impressionable." He gave her a look that was both a dismissal and a threat before he left. "Pay him no mind," Eleanor said, her face grim. "Marcus is concerned only with the bottom line. He sees emotion as a liability." But Marcus's visit had planted a seed of poison. He had made Lena feel like an intruder, a grifter. His suspicion hung in the air, a challenge to the fragile connection she and Eleanor were building. His presence was a stark reminder that this world of wealth had guards and gatekeepers, and she was an outsider he was determined to expel. The stakes had been raised. This was no longer just about discovering the past. It was about proving she belonged in the present. Marcus's cynicism had the opposite of its intended effect. It solidified Eleanor's resolve. "He thinks you are after my money," she said to Lena later that day, her voice sharp with anger. "He cannot comprehend that I might be after something far more valuable, the truth." That evening, they returned to Amelia's room. It was no longer just a shrine. It was a potential crime scene, a place where secrets had been buried. They began to search not for mementos, but for clues. They sifted through sketchbooks, looked between the pages of novels, and checked the pockets of old coats hanging in the closet. It was inside a large, wooden hope chest at the foot of the bed that they found it. Tucked beneath a stack of neatly folded baby blankets was a small, leather-bound box, locked with a tiny brass key. "I've never seen this before," Eleanor whispered, her brow furrowed. The key was nowhere to be found. After a moment of frustration, Lena, remembering her days of fixing everything with nothing, retrieved a hairpin from her purse. With surprising dexterity, she jiggled the pin in the old lock until it clicked open. Inside, nestled on faded velvet, was a stack of letters tied with a silk ribbon. The handwriting was Amelia's, but the letters weren't addressed to anyone Eleanor knew. They were love letters, passionate and full of secret longings, addressed to a man named Leo. He was an artist, a painter like her, but one who struggled to sell his work, who lived in a rundown studio across town. They read the letters one by one, their contents painting a picture of a forbidden romance. Amelia's father, Eleanor's late husband Richard, had vehemently disapproved. He saw Leo as a fortune hunter, unworthy of the Vance name. "Father says I am to forget you," one letter read. "He has forbidden me from seeing you. He doesn't understand, Leo. He thinks he can control my heart with money and threats. But my heart is already yours." The later letters grew more desperate. They spoke of a plan to run away together, to escape to a small coastal town where they could paint and live freely, away from her father's suffocating influence. Then, the tone shifted. "Something has happened," the second to last letter said, the handwriting shaky. "A complication. A beautiful, terrifying complication. I can't write more, it isn't safe. But it changes everything. We have to leave sooner. Our secret must be protected at all costs." The last letter was a single, tear-stained page. "He knows. I don't know how, but Father knows everything. He has locked me in. He threatened you, my love. He said he would ruin you, ensure you never worked again. I cannot let that happen. Forgive me. I have to do what he says. It is the only way to keep our secret safe." The letters ended there. There was no explanation of the secret, no mention of what her father had forced her to do. Eleanor looked at Lena, her face pale. The story of her daughter's death, a simple, tragic accident, was beginning to unravel, revealing layers of coercion, secrets, and a father's cruel control. And floating between them, unspoken, was the beautiful, terrifying complication Amelia had fought to protect. Marcus's campaign against Lena grew more insidious. He began appearing at the penthouse unannounced, making comments about Lena's sudden change in fortune in front of Eleanor. He was laying a foundation of doubt, painting Lena as a master manipulator. His plan culminated one afternoon when Eleanor was on a lengthy call with her lawyers. Marcus arrived, feigning concern. "Aunt Eleanor, I was just reviewing the household inventory with the insurers. You know that sapphire brooch your mother left you? The one you keep in the jewelry box on your dresser? I can't seem to account for it." Eleanor's eyes widened in alarm. The brooch was a priceless heirloom. "I'm sure it's just misplaced," Marcus said smoothly, his eyes flicking towards Lena, who was organizing files across the room. "But it is strange. It was there just last week." The implication was disgusting in its clarity. Lena felt the blood drain from her face. She knew with absolute certainty that Marcus had taken it. This was his trap. "I have not touched that jewelry box," Lena said, her voice shaking slightly but firm. "Of course not," Marcus said with a placating smile. "No one is accusing anyone. We should simply have a look around." This was the test. Lena knew what he wanted. He wanted her to get defensive, to panic, to refuse a search, all of which would make her look guilty. He wanted to shatter Eleanor's trust in her. But Lena thought of her mother, of the quiet dignity with which she faced her illness every day. She would not let this entitled man break her. "You are right," Lena said, looking directly at Eleanor, her gaze steady and clear. "We should search. Search my room. Search my belongings. And then we should call the police and report it stolen. A piece that valuable, they will need to conduct a full investigation. They will fingerprint the entire suite, of course." Marcus's smile faltered. That was not the reaction he had anticipated. The mention of police and fingerprints had visibly unnerved him. Now, let's not be hasty," he stammered. "There's no need to involve the authorities yet." "I insist," Lena said, her voice gaining strength. "If I am to work here in your home," she said to Eleanor, "I cannot have a cloud of suspicion over my head. My integrity is all I have. It is not for sale, and it will not be questioned." Eleanor watched the exchange, her expression unreadable. She saw the panic in her nephew's eyes and the unwavering, principled stand of the young woman before her. She made her decision. "Lena is right, Marcus. We will call the police." "Wait," Marcus said, a bead of sweat on his brow. Perhaps I was mistaken. Let me just recheck my briefcase. With all the paperwork, perhaps. He hurried to the foyer, fumbled with his briefcase for a moment, and then returned, holding the glittering sapphire brooch. Oh, thank goodness! How foolish of me. It must have gotten caught on a file. I am so sorry for the alarm. The lie was pathetic, the setup now painfully obvious. He had planned to find it in Lena's room or purse later. Lena's refusal to be intimidated had forced his hand. She had faced his test not with anger, but with an incorruptible sense of self-worth. In that moment, Eleanor Vance knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that this young woman was not a grifter. Her character was as pure and true as the birthmark she wore on her wrist. The failed setup was the final straw. Eleanor's trust in her nephew was shattered, and her belief in Lena was absolute. "He will not bother you again," she promised, her voice laced with cold fury. "Now we finish this." They returned to the box of letters, rereading the final, frantic note from Amelia. "It is the only way to keep our secret safe." What had her father done? Tucked into the sleeve of the leather box was something they had missed. A small, flat, silver key. It wasn't for a diary. It looked like a key for a safe deposit box. The next morning, Eleanor made a call to the president of her bank. Within the hour, they were in a private vault, a place of hushed reverence and cold steel. Using her authority as Amelia's next of kin, she was granted access to a long-forgotten box registered in her daughter's name. The bank manager slid the metal container from the wall and placed it on a table in a private viewing room, leaving them alone. Eleanor's hands trembled as she unlocked it. It wasn't filled with jewels or bonds, contained only 2 items. The first was a photograph, a slightly faded Polaroid of a newborn baby, swaddled in a hospital blanket. The baby's tiny hand was uncurled, and there, starkly visible on the miniature wrist, was a perfect, 5-pointed star. Lena let out a strangled gasp, her hand flying to her own tattooed wrist. It was her. It had to be. Beneath the photo was a folded document, an official birth certificate. Lena's eyes scanned the paper, her heart hammering against her ribs. Baby girl Vance. Mother, Amelia Catherine Vance. The father's name was listed as Leo Garrison. And then, the final piece of the puzzle. Tucked inside the folded certificate was one last letter, written in Amelia's hand, but this one was a diary entry, addressed to her unborn child. "To my little star," it began. "If you are ever reading this, it means the world has gone terribly wrong, but also that a small part of me has survived. My father found out about you. He called you a mistake, a stain on our family's name. He has given me an ultimatum. I either give you up for a private, anonymous adoption, or he will use his power to destroy Leo, to have him arrested on false charges, to ruin his life forever. He would do it. I know he would. So I have made the most difficult choice of my life. I am going to let you go to save your father. They will tell everyone you were stillborn. My mother will never know the truth. It will break her heart, but my father says it is better than the shame. I will never stop loving you. Look for the stars. I will be there somewhere. Your mother, Amelia." The room spun. The sterile silence of the vault was filled with the deafening truth. Eleanor was sobbing, not with grief this time, but with a complex storm of rage, sorrow, and overwhelming love. Lena was not a coincidence. She was not a grifter. She was the secret. She was Amelia's daughter. She was Eleanor's granddaughter. Back at the penthouse, the air was thick with unspoken grief and newfound love. Eleanor held Lena's hand, her grip surprisingly strong, as if she were afraid to let go and lose her all over again. There was one final piece of business. With a grim, resolute expression, Eleanor picked up the phone. "Marcus, I need you to come to the apartment immediately. There is a family matter to discuss." When Marcus arrived, he wore his usual mask of solicitous charm, but it slipped the moment he saw the documents spread out on the coffee table. Amelia's letters, the birth certificate, the photograph. Lena stood beside Eleanor, no longer an employee, but an equal. "What is all this?" Marcus asked, his voice tight. "This is the truth," Eleanor said, her voice dangerously calm. She explained everything, the letters, the secret lover, the forced adoption orchestrated by her own husband. "Richard stole my daughter's child from her. He let me believe my grandchild was dead for 25 years. Marcus scoffed, a nervous tremor in his voice. "This is absurd. A wild story cooked up by this girl. It's a fraud." "Is it?" Eleanor slid the photograph of the newborn baby across the table. "Look at her wrist, Marcus. Look at it." He glanced at the photo, then at Lena's wrist, and for the first time, raw panic flashed in his eyes. He had no defense against the physical proof. His composure finally cracked, not with remorse, but with the arrogant fury of a man who has been caught. "Fine," he spat, his voice rising. "Fine. So what if I knew? I found some of Richard's old files years ago when I took over the estate management. I found the adoption papers, the payments to the agency to keep it quiet. I knew she existed." Eleanor recoiled as if struck. "You knew? You knew all this time that my granddaughter was alive, and you said nothing? And what was I supposed to do?" He sneered, his true, venomous nature finally exposed. "Uproot everything for some long-lost heir? Threaten my own position? The inheritance? I did what was necessary to protect the family, to protect our stability. She was a waitress in a greasy spoon. She was better off not knowing." His confession, born not of guilt but of pure, entitled arrogance, was the final, damning verdict. He hadn't just been an obstacle. He had been a knowing jailer of the truth, actively working to keep a grandmother and her grandchild apart, all for the sake of money. The confrontation was over. His greed had been his undoing. Justice was as swift as it was absolute. While Marcus was still spluttering his self-serving excuses, Eleanor was on the phone with her legal team. By the end of the day, Marcus Vance was fired from all his positions within Vance Enterprises. He was officially disinherited, his name struck from Eleanor's will and every trust he was a part of. Legal proceedings were initiated to investigate the extent of his fraud in concealing Lena's identity. He was, in an instant, cast out. With the poison removed, Eleanor turned her full attention to Lena. Her first act was not one of sentiment, but of profound, practical love. She established a trust in Lena's name, a fund so significant it guaranteed she would never have to worry about money again. "The first thing you will do," Eleanor said, her voice soft but firm, "is call the best hospital in the country. Your mother will have a private room, the finest doctors, whatever she needs. Her fight is now our fight." Tears streamed down Lena's face as she made the call. For the first time, they were not tears of stress or fear, but of overwhelming relief. The crushing weight she had carried on her shoulders for years, the constant, grinding anxiety for her mother's well-being, simply evaporated. A lifetime of struggle, erased in a single afternoon of truth. Weeks later, the sterile penthouse was beginning to feel like a home. Flowers in bright, vibrant colors, the kind Amelia had loved to paint, filled the rooms. Lena and Eleanor sat together on a plush sofa, looking through an old photo album, Eleanor pointing out a baby picture of Amelia. "You have her smile," Eleanor said, her voice thick with emotion. Lena smiled back, a genuine, relaxed smile that reached her eyes. Her adoptive mother was recovering in a state-of-the-art medical facility, her prognosis better than it had been in years. Lena was taking classes, exploring the passion for art she had inherited, but never had the time or money to pursue. She was no longer just surviving. She was beginning to live. The star on her wrist, once a simple birthmark hidden beneath a vine, now felt like a compass point, a mark of destiny that had guided her through the darkness and back to where she belonged. How often do we overlook the small signs, the quiet coincidences that might connect us to one another? A shared glance, a familiar gesture, a mark upon the skin. Lena's story reminds us that truth, no matter how deeply buried, has a way of finding its way to the light, and that the greatest fortunes are not found in bank vaults, but in the unbreakable bonds of family. What invisible threads might be connecting you to someone else's story right now? If this story touched your heart and reminded you of the power of hope and perseverance, please like, share, and subscribe for more inspirational content that celebrates the human spirit.